You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. One of the world's leading pianists, Stephen Hough, was to perform here in Winnipeg alongside the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra back in February. Now, that concert, of course, was canceled. However, to the delight of Manitoba audiences and indeed anyone with an internet connection, Stephen Hough performs in an exclusive MCO online recital tonight, the evening of April 8th, streaming through the 15th. And I'm beyond excited to say that Stephen Hough has joined me digitally. Hello.
Simon, hello. Nice to see you.
And it is so wonderful to see you and so thrilled that you've arrived in Winnipeg without having left home in London.
That's right. No need to connect through Chicago or Toronto or anywhere else.
Yeah, the magic of the internet. And I suppose a sort of familiar narrative playing out here, especially for someone such as yourself, a world touring performer, the disappointment of the canceled live concert and the consolation of a digital one. And I thought we'd start this conversation there. I'm wondering if you'd share some musings, some thoughts on the digital recital.
Well, I was doing a concert yesterday, actually, at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Of course, it's a 6,000 seat hall, and there were literally 0 people, well, perhaps 2 in that whole hall. But I was there with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and Vasily Petrenko, and we did Saint-Saëns' Fifth Concerto, recorded it, and that's the normal as it's been, isn't it, for the last year or so. And indeed, the recital that I'm going to be playing for you virtually in Winnipeg was recorded last year, also in London. And, you know, I think it's just what we've all not got used to, but made do with, I would say. I mean, I think there are many positives about this. I mean, not least the fact that we can actually do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the end, we're going to want to be with the person coughing in the row next to us, the person opening a cough suite, you know, whatever else. There is something about that human interaction, isn't there, in a concert, that we all share this experience in the same room, that I think, you know, whatever we do online, we're going to want to get back to that as well.
It's very, very true. And I mean, it's one of those things that we're still very much missing here in Manitoba, as you say, like there in London. But in preparation for this interview, I flipped through your book once again, Rough Ideas, and I skipped right to the back into the index, and I noticed there's no use of the word Zoom at all. Why would there be? We didn't know what it was in 2019, and YouTube only appears twice. So with that thought in mind, if you were to put one of these thoughts or 2 or 3 into the book, where do you think it would end up in the contents? Would it be in stage, or would it be in studio, or somewhere else altogether?
What an interesting point. I guess it would probably be in stage, wouldn't it?
Ah,
Although I'm confident that in 2 years, we're going to look back on this period as a weird blip rather than a really important new departure. I think some things may change. And I wrote a bit about this in a book, I guess in a slightly prophetic way, that we should get rid of intervals and have shorter concerts. Well, that's exactly what we've been doing. I've spoken to a number of concert presenters who want to carry on doing that beyond the pandemic. But I do think that our Zoom calls, I have a feeling that Zoom is going to be, as it's been a lifesaver for so many of us for the past year, I think it's going to be a curse word 18 months from now, and no one's going to want to hear. I would sell all your shares in Zoom maybe in about 8 months or so, because I think Zoom is going away.
yeah, it will be so wonderful to welcome you to Winnipeg whenever you can arrive. And if you're just tuning in, my name is Simon Rusnak, and you're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. And I have the immense pleasure of speaking with renowned pianist, writer, thinker, painter, Stephen Hough, named one of 20 living polymaths by The Economist, as he performs in an exclusive online recital with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. Now, you wear a lot of hats, metaphorical ones and literal ones. You've got a fine collection of them, don't you?
I do, actually. Yes, very fine.
And I think it's a hat maker in Chicago, isn't it?
Yeah, Optimo, if I can give a little plug for them. They're a wonderful hat maker. I've got far too many, really, because every time I went to Chicago, I would go and visit Graham, who is the manager and founder of Optimo. And he had this very light touch way of making me buy a hat, well, not least by giving me a number of hats. And then I really felt obligated to buy one the next time I went to visit. So yeah, I have enough to last me probably the rest of my life. But no, it's a great pleasure, and they're beautifully handmade. In but I might even have been able to stop in on the way to Winnipeg if I'd been coming that way.
Well, that's just it. And we are sometimes called the Chicago of the North. So there you have it. I mean, tying things together. You're also sporting a beautiful summer Panama hat on the cover of your latest solo disc, Vida Breve, the 60s something disc of yours on the Hyperion label that was released back in January. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks.
And despite that summary cover, a rather bleak topic, I suppose, life's short, and that's the inspiration on the disc, music inspired by or identifying with death. And the program that you've prepared for the MCO shares repertoire from that disc, both beginning, I think, with the Bach Chaconne arranged by Busoni, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think yeah, it's a brief life, but it's more about that the beauty of that life
Mhm.
in its brevity than it is specifically about death itself. Although that's something obviously that all of us can't avoid. We hope that it will be far in the distance, but it can't be avoided. But I think it's an excuse in a way, though, to pull together some amazing repertoire for the piano. You know, one of Chopin's masterpieces, his second piano sonata, which has the funeral march in it.
Mhm.
Liszt Funeral. Liszt was a man of big gestures, and this, if a man like Liszt is going to talk about funerals and death, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be in a big, extensive, and expansive kind of way. And I mean, this piece is overwhelming, I think, in its scope. It's only about 12 minutes long, but you really feel like you've lived a whole life during it. And then there are other pieces on there. Busoni's rethinking of Bizet's opera Carmen. He
Mhm.
wrote what he called it his sixth sonatina, but it's a fantasia on themes of Carmen, but very different from the 19th century kind of potpourri paraphrase of operas. This is a piece that looks inside the soul, really, of Carmen. And so you get it's also short, but you get a wonderful snapshot of various moods from the opera.
There's an opera or two about death, I think, if, if people
Yeah, I
flip
think
through
if
the
you took
repertoire.
death out of opera, you'd have pretty empty seasons in the world's opera houses, wouldn't you?
Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about the list. You mentioned the Funerai. There's also on the program the Mephisto waltz, and I mean, Liszt, I suppose, in a way, fascinated with the macabre, this medieval legend of Faust, but he has a way of making it sparkle, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. Well, on my recording, you have Mephisto Waltz number 4,
Hmm.
which is the Bagatelle without tonality, and that was a piece written at the end of his life. This is more from the middle of his life, from around the time of his great B minor sonata, and this is a great virtuoso showpiece. You know, he pulls every trick, every knife out of the drawer. Every sort of effect that he largely invented at the keyboard. Liszt was really at the forefront of everything we think about when we think of the. It's also harmonically very progressive, not as adventurous as the fourth Mephisto waltz, but still you hear very much the world of Scriabin in the
Hmm.
middle section of this Mephisto waltz number 1, even though it was written what 40 years before, or 30 years before Scriabin was doing similar things. So Liszt was always this incredible prophet, always looking way beyond his own century, and indeed, even now, 2 centuries later, we still, in a sense, are indebted to him.
And also on the program, though not on the disc, you've recorded it before. There's music of Robert Schumann, his fantasy opus 17, just a monumental work in 3 movements. Why was it important to include this on the solo recital for the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra?
Well, it's dedicated to Liszt, this piece.
Hmm.
And I think that both Schumann and Liszt felt that this was his best piano piece, his greatest work. Uh, I just think it sums up everything about the world of Schumann, particularly. You know, it has this incredible passion and drive in the first movement, but also this intimacy, which in a way Schumann got better than any other composer. This almost whispering between performer and listener. And I find it a very intimate piece to play. It's wonderful to play for a live audience because you just feel like, even if there are people in the audience you don't know, that somehow for the length of that 30 minutes, you've had this very intimate experience together. And that's incredibly touching, actually. And when I was recording this, we were right in the middle of the first lockdown, and I think things seemed even bleaker than they do now. There was a sense of we really don't know where this is going. And I feel a piece like this Schumann unites us across the centuries, across the continents. It's one of these life enhancing pieces that great classical music is all about.
Mhm.
The fact that we share in these heightened emotional experiences, and it unifies us, whatever background we're from, whatever language we speak, race we come from, social background. We're all the same when we're listening to Schumann's Fantasy.
Yeah, it really is a marvelous piece of music, a music that takes a listener on a journey. And I also read that it wasn't one that was really performed during his lifetime, though, to go back to this thematic idea of death. Like Liszt performed it privately, though not all too publicly. And Clara Schumann didn't start programming it until 10 years after Schumann's death. So in a way, I suppose, also works into the program thematically that way.
Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, it's we tend not to remember that concerts as we think of them in the modern way, at least until a year ago, are a fairly recent thing.
Hmm.
If you look at concert programs from the late 19th, early 20th century, they were nothing like programs that we've had since the 1920s on. And of course, now we're maybe due for another change. In those early days, concerts tended to be big mixed bags. I was just, as I said yesterday, recording at the Albert Hall, and outside my dressing room was a poster from a concert in 1941. It was during the war at the Albert Hall. And it had a singer, it had a piano concerto, it had a movement from here. It was really a kind of very different thing. And we fell into this tradition of doing either series recital programs, these big long pieces.
Hmm.
A piece like the Schumann Fantasy probably would have been too long to include in a concert program in the mid 19th century. That just wasn't how people listened to music.
Well, thankfully, it's on your program tonight. And Stephen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here at Classic 107.
My great pleasure. Be well, all of you, and I look forward to seeing you all in person very soon.